I've fallen down and gotten back up enough times. Like, I know I can do it again. I've survived all of my bad days, and all of those bad days kept bringing me to these amazing moments in my life where I feel so grateful that things happened just the way that they did.
Hello and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast where we explore authenticity at work and talk about what it really takes to help you succeed in your career more sustainably by doing it your way. I'm your host, Sandhya Sudhakar, and today we're closing out 2025 and opening up 2026 with a very special New Year's episode. And while we aren't diving deep into work-related topics specifically today, we are talking about two really key elements of what it means to work your way, looking into the past for insight and creating clarity on what you want moving forward. Now, this is the time of the year when a lot of us naturally pause, we reflect on what the past year has asked of us or taught us or surprised us with, and we look ahead to what we want to welcome in next. And so for this conversation, I'm joined by somebody who brings a really unique and amazing lens to these questions or things that we're going to explore. And that is my dear friend, professional astrologer and attorney, Julie McGill, or as I often call her, Jules. Now, in this episode, Jules and I are going to look back at 2025 and what actually unfolded compared to what our intentions were or my word of the year was, and what we learned about ourselves. And we're going to talk about these moments that really shaped our personal journeys. And we're going to talk about some themes that define the year from an astrology standpoint and what stood out. And then as we look at 2026, we're going to look at it both collectively and personally. And Jules is going to walk us through these major astrological moments or the themes that we can expect for the year ahead collectively. And of course, we share our own intentions for 2026, what we want more of, why it matters to us, and how we plan to bring those desires to life. Now, my hope is that this conversation helps you reflect with compassion on the year that you just lived and feel grounded, inspired, and open-hearted as you step into a brand new one. Now, if you're brand new to astrology, or if you want to brush up on the basics, I would recommend you give episode 76 a listen. And if you just want to make sure you have your chart handy for today's episode, check the show notes for instructions on where to pull that. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, happy 2026, or at least when this episode airs, it will be early January of next year. And I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, Jules. So thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me, Sandhya.
So we're going to talk about a year-end reflection for 2025. We're going to look forward into 2026. And I love doing these episodes every year. I mean, this is the second out of 2 years that I'm doing a New Year's episode. And I think, it is this kind of like natural cyclical moment to reflect, to project forward what we want. And there's a number of things other cultures don't celebrate this kind of like big transition at the same time. And so I guess what we can do is just like offer up a little bit of maybe what we intended for this past year, how that turned out, and then let's look forward into next year and what are each of us focusing on. I also like to use this as an opportunity to process out loud a little bit and like express what it is that kind of has been floating around in my head.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2025. Where do you want to start? We can talk a little bit about some of the astrological themes, or we can talk a little bit about maybe each of our intentions.
In 2025, I really wanted to let go of a lot of rigidity I was having about the way I work, my work schedule, the number of hours I work every single day. And preparing for this discussion today, I looked back at my journal from around that time, and I don't typically journal. So it was interesting that an entry even existed. And so when I read through that, I was remembering why that was my intention for 2025. And it matched so well with the astrology that was happening in that moment. So Mars was in Cancer at that time, and Mars in astrology relates to kind of our motivations and the way we're doing what we're doing why we're doing it that way, how we are going after our goals, right? And during that time, Mars was in Cancer, and Cancer is a very security oriented sign.
Mm-hmm.
So based on my history in being an entrepreneur and trying and failing at multiple businesses, I was in a period of life where work was very consistent and I had even more than I needed. But out of fear and like that need for emotional security, I was just like hammering it out constantly and being very rigid with getting things done in a certain time frame. And all of that was self-imposed. No one was asking me to work within these constraints. That was something that was coming from inside of me. And so in 2025, I wanted to let myself relax a little bit and get into a rhythm that was more sustainable. And it was interesting that it wasn't so much that I succeeded in that goal out of like effort or that intention, but the astrology of 2025 brought Jupiter into Cancer. And that meant bringing like rewards or solutions to the same area of life where Mars had recently caused like upheaval and problems and discomfort. And so it was interesting how the astrology played out. And I don't know if you have any reflections on that yourself, but it seemed that, at the very end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, there were things that were going on in our life that as 2025 panned out, there tended to be these like natural solutions or resolutions to those problems.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious because Cancer is so much about emotional security. And when you're talking about like you were taking a lot of action, you were like, pushing yourself so hard in that area. For you, emotional security, was it about like earning? Was it about purpose? Like having something to do with yourself? Like what did emotional security like mean for you in that like being super rigid and working so hard?
I think it was twofold. First of all, financial. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't know how consistent work will be because it's not something that you have full control over. Right. So that financial consistency was very important to me, but also, when you've been through a lot of ups and downs, and as I said, I've had some failures as an entrepreneur, when you build these client relationships, you want to do whatever you can to make sure that that client stays happy and that you're showing up as your best self all the time. And so I think it was both that financial element, but also just wanting to show up and be the best me that I could be all the time and getting things done really promptly. And looking back, it's so funny because they didn't care. Like that client and his staff could not have cared less. That was all me.
Yeah, it's like that's the way you thought you needed to be to get to that secure place, and like it's not the truth or the total reality.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for me, I think a lot of the themes of my year, or like the way maybe the cycle of my year has gone, I think largely feels like, and you can tell me if there's other factors, but largely feels like the Saturn in Pisces placement that transit was super important. And so like I'm a Pisces rising, so that is a really important, aspect of my chart. And Saturn is hard lessons and hard work and boundaries and restrictions sometimes. And so I feel like, and Saturn has been in Pisces since late 2023. Is that right?
March of 2023.
Early 2023. And so in those years, 2023, 2024, even up until like April, May of 2025, like I feel like I have been through it. And first house is self-identity. It's your physical body. It's all these things. And like in all of those areas, I think I've like turned something totally over in a sense of like, I had some like back issues that really impacted me a lot in 23 and 24. And I was coming out of that around the time that Saturn was leaving Pisces this year, getting back to like moving in a way that felt good for me and like getting more intense with like my physical activity and working out. And I had like really rewritten some like childhood narratives about like who I thought I was and who I thought my parents were, and like this story that I had about myself and my past and my identity, and like rewriting a lot of that. But like that was hard, right? It was felt dark and really heavy at times. And this April, May, like it was like end of April, I felt different. Like I started feeling lighter. I started feeling more free, and like this, I got my spark back. Like I actually, in May, June, July, people were like, "You're glowing." I'm like, I feel more like myself right now than I have in such a long time. And then Saturn goes back into Pisces for a little, last hurrah. And it was like clockwork. September came around and it was like this magical unicorn mermaid summer that I had, where I was just like skipping through the world, sprinkling fairy dust everywhere. Opportunities were coming to me in my business. I met somebody that is now my like partner that I'm like super in love with. And all of these things were happening. It's like Saturn comes back in September, and it all like felt like it came to this like screeching halt, and all the reality of all these things and the hardship and like the money I spent over the summer and all the insecurities coming up in me and this new relationship, and like all of these things are like back. And I'm like, why was it like so perfectly timed? Like astrology is so real. So I'll let you say whatever you feel like saying about that, and then I'll talk about like what was my intention when I started the year.
Yeah, it is funny. I've been practicing professional astrology I'm going into my 9th year, and it is wild. Like I'm surprised every day how it works and how well it works and how precise it is. And you really hit the nail on the head. So Saturn went into your first house in early March 2023, and then it left in May of this year. So yeah, it relieved that burden and that heaviness that you'd been feeling. And Saturn through the first house is not an easy transit by any means at all. I mean, it is nothing less than building an entirely new sense of self and a framework that like supports that and sustains that. Not to mention that Saturn in Pisces to begin with is a psychologically very heavy placement. And so I think people around the world have experienced that the last few years. Saturn is coloring kind of our inner emotional experience, and that might relate to things that are happening in our lives, like it did for you probably with Saturn in the first house. But for me, Saturn was in the 8th house, and it wasn't necessarily about anything that was happening in my life at the current time. It was, I feel like, experiencing the energy of the collective psyche right now was part of it, dealing with old grief. I mean, Pisces is a water sign. It's all about emotion, and Saturn is a planet that is dark and heavy and constrictive and restrictive. And when we do the work, Saturn is probably the most rewarding planet in the chart. Whatever it's doing, we can say yes to and lean into, and that might not be a fun 2.5-year journey, as it wasn't for you. Right. But once it leaves, there is this amazing feeling of, wow, like the work that I put in has real tangible results that is changing my life, that it is changing the way I move forward. And it feels really good when we work for things. I mean, there are other planets in astrology that kind of suggest when we might get a windfall or get things handed to us. But the truth is, as they say, easy come, easy go. And we don't appreciate those things there's a lot of satisfaction that we get when we work hard for something.
Yeah. And that's a lesson that I have internalized and really attribute to some of the conversations that you and I have had, because I have this Jupiter Saturn conjunction in my birth chart, and it's they're both on top of each other, and Jupiter is growth and expansion and abundance and good fortune and luck and all the things, and then it's Saturn's hard work, right? So this idea that all the amazing things in my life have come with work, and one, I was a little annoyed with that, because I'm why can't it just be easy? And to your point, right, which you said to me once, and I love how you frame it, it's I appreciate all the great things so much more because they have come with a hard lesson or discipline or, effort or whatever it was, right? And so I think for me, it's yes, I get it. And I felt, as Saturn has gone back into Pisces for this last I think about it as a sweeping up of anything that may be left behind, there's certain things that are coming up that I'm gosh, I thought I had dealt with this, and I really hadn't, or I hadn't dealt with it in this context, in the context of a relationship with somebody where it's going to bring up insecurities. I didn't have that room to work on that. I didn't have the context or that environment to work on these certain things. So yeah, we're coming back around to just make sure that I've done the work, or testing that I've done the work, or, in that sense, it feels right.
And you're almost done.
And oh my God, right, February? Yes. I'll mark it on my calendar. Life gets so much easier after February. I can go back into my magical unicorn mode. Hopefully, maybe, we'll see. But as I came into 2025, my word of the year that I picked out was invitation. And I host a vision boarding kind of little afternoon with a bunch of girlfriends every year. And my vision board had it was an ordinary day until it wasn't. It has magic and, experiencing magic every day, or just finding, the kind of amazingness in inviting in new opportunities. And this year really did pan out. And most of it was between that kind of, May and September time period. But I had business opportunities popping up seemingly out of nowhere. And that's not true. They weren't out of nowhere. They were out of a lot of the work and consistent work that I've put in since 2023 in showing up and sharing my viewpoint and having things out there on the internet in the world that represent me well. People coming to me saying, I looked at all your stuff and you're the one I want to work with. We want to do this training. Could you do it for, my organization? And that was amazing. And then just fun opportunity. I did a lot more dating in this summer than I had in years before that. And so this idea of invitation, I do feel really played out. And it was, the energy was aligned with that, where I started to feel a lot lighter and more like myself, and just having those things kind of come to me.
That was a good word for the year too. I mean, so astrologically appropriate, because 2025, a big chunk of the middle of 2025 gave us a bit of a preview of what is coming in 2026. And we can talk more about that, but there, a lot of cycles have been coalescing to the point that, 2025 and 2026 really are a new beginning, where we reset a lot of different parts of our lives and are entering what we will definitively in the future see when we look back, right? Whoa, that was the turning point. That was a big turning point for me in my life, and shifting my life into a new era. And that's what we're doing. And so these 2 years added together, 2025 and 2026, are an interesting combination, because 2025 gave us glimpses of the future, but we don't really have it all the way yet. And then 2026 is really when we start getting a firm hold into, okay, what does life look like for me now? And where am I going now that I'm kind of around the bend of that pivot point.
I'm curious what you would say to somebody who maybe is like, oh my God, I went through the ringer in 2025. Because I feel like collectively, a lot of people are feeling that way, right? And like from real experience, like it's been a hard year collectively in the US, like in general. And so I wonder, are there places that someone can kind of look to in their life to be like, what was this glimpse? Where was it? Like, how did I see it? Maybe if they can't see it because they're kind of clouded by just like the difficulty of this year.
This might sound like I'm avoiding the question, but as we go through a cycle reset, so what's happening right now is Saturn and Neptune are coming into an alignment that happens every 36 years.
Wow.
As we come into an alignment of those planets, what we are letting go of is a life trajectory that has lasted for decades. And we are opening up a new, not even chapter, like a new book of life almost.
Mm.
And when we go through those periods of time, especially in a 36-year cycle, the winter, so to speak, portion of that cycle lasts a really long time. And we know in winter it is dark. We don't have the energy that we would like to have. We don't see the life that we want to see. We don't see the buds on the trees. We don't see the flowers, And so I like to remind people, I mean, unless you're living down south somewhere, when we in Kentucky and Illinois have been through 3 months of winter, we're really tired of the cold. Like we're getting really, really antsy. It's like, I don't want to see another dark day. I don't want to feel the cold anymore. I'm ready for something new. And that's 3 months out of a 1-year cycle. When we're talking about a 36-year cycle, the winter portion of that cycle that feels dark and heavy and there's less light, it lasts for years. And so that's where we are societally. We see it, right? And we can feel that way in our own lives about particular areas of life, sometimes about life as a whole. But there are areas of life where it's like, wow, I've done a lot of letting go and things are falling away. People, relationships, jobs, concepts of self, right? Like, health routines. There are things that are happening that relate to the end of an old cycle, and letting those things go can take their toll on us, especially when we don't see the new yet. And that is part of being at the reset. It's like that new beginning is coming. In fact, it's here. Like we're basically standing at it, but I like to, compare it to a seed that's planted in the soil. Like we don't see anything. There is a new beginning that is beginning to gestate down there, but we can't look at the dirt and say like nothing is happening. But that's how we can feel. And so I think some people this year, we're starting to get, just this instinct that like something big is coming, but I can't see it yet, or I don't know what it is yet, or I don't know how to make sense of it. Some people did have new opportunities or new people coming into their lives. And so it's different for every person. But I think the takeaway and the most important thing to tell yourself is, when we have a new moon every month, it's dark. We don't see anything. Like we don't really know where things are headed. But, sure as every month that goes by, the light starts to grow in the sky and we have a full moon again. And so that's how the cycles of life work. That's how the storylines of our life work. And sometimes when we're in that reset portion of the cycle, just like the new moon, it is a new beginning, but it can feel dark. And that doesn't mean nothing is happening. That doesn't mean that new promising opportunities aren't on the horizon for you, or that some type of clarity. That's another thing that we can associate with darkness. It's not just, that there's physical darkness. It's like metaphorically, I can't see where I'm going next. I can't see very far into the future or even plan because everything feels really uncertain. And so it is really an exciting period of time when we know that the new beginning is happening, but we can also really get in our heads when we don't have that illumination or clarity about, what are some of the things that are pieces of my new beginning, but they're coming. And so that's one way I think astrology becomes really helpful is when we can see the larger context and make sense of it, we can buy ourselves a lot of peace in knowing this is not necessarily the period of time where any of us should have a super firm idea of where we're going. We might have some indications. We might have some intuition. There might have been things that popped up in the last year that were clues, But anyone who actually thought that they had perfectly mapped out where things are going from here will probably be very disappointed because, really that new beginning happens February 20th of this coming year. So we have a little bit of ways to go.
Yeah, we're still kind of like feeling around in a dark room, like not really sure what anything is. And I mean, I feel that for sure in my own life where it's like, I know everything is about to change and like, I don't know what it's going to look like yet necessarily, like in many, many areas of my life. Right. And I think, my business is one of them, but I can take some guesses as to what that might look like because of some of the opportunities that have come up, like you said. And like, I think it was something on Instagram or whatever. I was, some astrology related thing I was listening to. And it was like, just like keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, like look around and like take in the messages that are coming to you and be open to it being a different message than you thought you were going to get or a different direction on something than you maybe thought you were going to go. And for me, it's like, those types of things are like good for me to keep in mind and remember because I am such a planner and I'm super practical as a person, right? And I want to like know where everything's going and I want to have that sense of certainty like any human does, right? We love certainty as humans in our brains and our bodies, and relinquishing control and kind of just like having that trust, right? Or that surrender to some things on the way. And like, I don't need to spend the next 3 months prepping and planning for it because I don't even know what it's going to be. So chill out,
At least it is something to consider when we're talking about goals and intentions for 2026. It's picking out ideas that fit into that concept will serve us really well because there is this bit of uncertainty that is characterizing this moment in history, and so it's like, okay, well, how do we cope with that? How do we not just survive that, but even like build it into what we're trying to create for ourselves or a new idea of wellness or daily life or work habits or, whatever else? How do we kind of build in that uncertainty and be familiar with it and be okay with it and know it really is temporary. And we can survive that and actually be pleasantly surprised. My word for this year is curiosity. Because when you're curious, you're in the moment, you have an open mind and open heart to, what could this mean? Anything that arrives in my space and, there's no trying to figure out where that's come from, how it relates to my past. I don't want to repeat my past again. We get into like all of these reflections on the past, or we can project into the future if something happens that kind of throws us off. It's like, oh my gosh, what does this mean for my future? Am I never going to achieve what I wanted to achieve? And so, my intention for this year is just to be curious, because when you work with astrology, you see how the stories always pan out in total perfection, and they don't feel like perfection in the time, But if we stay curious, we're more likely to at least see beyond the surface of what's happening and just think to ourselves, oh, like, well, this is interesting. I wonder where this is going, and that's a much more pleasant way to perceive something than to just, take ourselves into the past or into the future.
So you talked about kind of your theme for the year, word for the year, maybe like mindset or the state of being, right? Is curiosity and like presence, openness, like open to possibility. And I love that. And I think for me, I've been thinking a bit about what it is that I want. And a lot of it's because of this last couple of months now. I mean, it's November now when we're recording this, but by that time, it's going to be almost February when Saturn leaves Pisces. But this like kind of, I don't know, I'd say difficult moment or like return to like some discipline for me has brought things out of me, especially like when it comes to relationship, but also like in my career where I'm feeling like some of that insecurity kind of coming back. And it's not me. And I think because I got such a glimpse of just like me in my authenticity and like feeling really free and light and like all of those great things, sparkly, whatever you want to call it, this summer, it's like, okay, getting back to that, and not just getting back to that, but like being really almost unapologetic. And so much of my past and a lot of the theme of my life is like adapting to the things around me, adapting to my environment, adapting to the people in my life or the people I needed to feel like or felt like I needed to gain approval from, right? Whether that's like kids in school or people in my life, like my family or relationships or whatever. And so there's so much of that. And it's gotten me to where I am. Like it's helped me be successful, to be relatable, to be accepted, to have that sense of connection with people. And I'm kind of ready to let that go. It's easier said than done, but I think like being unapologetic about who I am, almost like this idea of audacity. Like I look at people who just show up and like expect the world and are always, like living really in this big way. Like I have envy for those people. And it's like, wow, you can walk into a room and like just not give a fuck about what anyone thinks of you. And again, it's like, that's maybe never going to leave me altogether because I will always care about my perception. But can I keep the good parts of that where it's like I'm showing up for people in a way that they need me to, and like I'm doing what I need for myself also. And so much of it is rooted in all the difficult things, right? Fear of rejection, seeking approval, all of those things, needing to earn connection in that way. And so, yeah, audacity, being a little more shameless, being a little more unapologetic, like that's what I kind of want for myself for this year.
That is actually a very nice outcome of 2025, that you were in that place. Mm-hmm. And as always, very much aligned with some of the astrology that happened in 2025. And I think in 2026, you're going to get a perfect test, in terms of seeing, okay, how do I take this new sense of self that is a little bit more firm into my relationships? And I know how to be flexible. I've done it forever. And so, as you know, like sometimes we get kicked back into those old habits, or we end up in situations where it's like, it's more comfortable to give or to be the old way again. And part of that is you. That flexibility is a gift. And so it's like, well, how can I be giving? How can I be cooperative? How can I still be flexible while being really firm in my sense of boundaries and my needs and what I want, and showing up super authentically? So I think you're going to have an amazing opportunity this coming year to add those two things together and to integrate that flexibility with a much firmer sense of self.
Yeah, I love that because I do think like I also have been noticing where I've had maybe beliefs or like ideas that I've held onto pretty firmly that I'm like, I can let that go. Like, the way certain things are supposed to happen, or, this person in my life that like looks very different than maybe some of the things that I thought I wanted or needed, or even our dynamic is different in ways that I maybe would have been like a lot more rigid about in the past. And it's like, oh, I think there's a lot more acceptance that I'm starting to feel of like things can look different than maybe the way I had in my head mapped it out. And so I guess that's good, right? Because it's like we have this perfect plan and it's just never going to turn out that way. But being really open about how other people are in their authenticity and allowing that a lot more versus like kind of assuming that the way that I have done it is the right way. And so there's quite a bit of that, I feel like, especially recently. But the idea of just like, yeah, but I also get to like speak my truth. And I think for me, one of the things that's then going to require is like, I like live in my head a lot of the times. I like am an overthinker, a ruminator. I'll play scenarios out. I'll like want to conceptualize things or intellectualize them. And that's like not really me being present in my body. And so I've been thinking about ways that how can I be more present with myself and more connected to myself and more just like grounded. And I think it's all like, it's body-based stuff and things like even taking a dance class. Like I've been tossing around ideas about like things I might want to do going into the new year to just be more connected to like the sensations of like what's going on inside of me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's one way I think I'm going to put this intention, into action, I guess. I'm curious for you with curiosity, like what does that look like in your day-to-day? How do you embody that? Or are there things you want to, I don't know, do differently? Or like, how do you go about that?
Well, there are definitely situations that are happening in real life, in real time right now that, staying curious is really the best solution. I still do legal work. The owner of the firm that is my primary client, he did like kind of like a partial retirement this past year without telling me in advance. And we were having lunch one day and he like dropped this on me and, it was really scary. And the workload had lightened up a lot this past year. And so it could be scary, but I'm choosing to be curious. Also, I used to do a lot of workshops in my astrology business, and I stopped doing that for a long time because, frankly, I didn't find it worth my effort, like kind of the return in terms of like signups for readings. That was really not how I was generating much of my business. So I stopped doing that for a long time. And then recently people have been in my ear, like, do you do workshops? This is like a message I'm receiving over and over again. So just several weeks ago, flew down to Florida and did a workshop and a lot of private readings. And it was just like a sensational success. It was so wonderful. I felt like I was showing up as a new version of me. I felt, really sure of myself in terms of, presenting the information, knowing what my audience was capable of hearing or understanding and really digesting. And so I felt really good about that. And so I'm wondering, like, where does this go? Like, I'm really curious. If I was wondering, how does it feel to go back into the workshop space? Like, does it feel good? Does it feel promising? The answer was yes. But how that's going to work, or how I'm going to work that into my legal work and what my legal work will really look like because of the workload changing and the changing roles within the office that I work in, curious is the only way that I can be, or I would probably just freak myself out. I also know I'm heading into my Uranus opposition, and this is kind of a rite of passage that we all have in our lives in our early to mid 40s. Some listeners, if they're familiar with astrology at all, might have heard of the Saturn return, and it's kind of like it's a very different experience, but it's similar in that we all experience it in the same kind of age in our life. Mm-hmm. And so I see that coming in the chart. And here's one of the lessons in astrology is like, even astrologers, we see things coming and it's like, oh my, like, what does this mean? Like, how is this going to manifest in terms of circumstances that are kind of beyond my control, or, might be curveballs that I have to handle over the coming year, or massive changes. And I have some indication of what those might be given what I just said. But do I really know that's it? Or is there more coming? And so I think curiosity is just the way I'm coping with knowing there is uncertainty, and also knowing there's also an unknown bag of uncertainty that might be factors I'm not even considering now. And so based on my past experiences in life, I've always been glad in hindsight the way things panned out, and things have always worked out for me so beautifully. And I just need to stay in that frame of mind right now because, as I told you, we're coming off of 2 years ago when I was super rigid and just going hard in the paint all the time because I've had so much instability that I felt no sense of safety, no sense of foundation. And it's like I finally built that for myself. And now comes this again, like things kind of being thrown up in the air again. So I think it's just the most healthy way that I can approach the coming year and just staying present. And similar to what you said, it's interesting, this this word audacity and this idea of being unapologetic and really showing up as ourselves and being, authentic, if that's not a word I already said. But in 2025, Venus went retrograde in Aries, and Aries is the sign of self. And Venus is a symbol that speaks to relationships. And so that was a several month period of this past year where we were really trying to see, how am I operating in relationships? How am I showing up? Because yes, this is like a matter of needing to work with other people, but like, who am I and what are my needs and how am I showing up as someone who has kind of some standards and expectations, despite any ability I have to like be flexible and cooperate with other people. So that happened this past year. And it was interesting. I had an opportunity to kind of put that into practice. I was able to talk to the owner of the firm that I work for and say like, well, what does this mean for me? What does this look like for me? Am I going to have work? I also had a situation where new work was offered to me, like a new type of work, and I turned it down. And like the old me would have never. Ever, as an entrepreneur, no, you take what you can get. And the fact that I was able to say like, no, that's not really suitable to kind of like my work life and how things are structured and how I work these days felt amazing. So I think like we're both in similar spaces. It's interesting how the astrology shows up differently for each one of us, but it's still there. And these themes were like really coming through this past year. And, I'm there with you. I think there are many of us in like the teaching and healing and coaching professions who do have this ability to adapt well to other people and to, what's expected of us. And so, this past year, there was a big push, to think about what we need personally and to start bringing that into relationships and showing up in those new ways. So that's a really, really good aim for you in this coming year.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I'm looking at these notes that we made together, and the Venus retrograde was in Aries, just like a sign of like self, right? It's strong and action oriented and all of these things. And like, I was really considering like, what is it that I really need and want, from a professional standpoint, life standpoint, relationship standpoint. Like, I was doing a lot of this reflection at that time. I think it's March and April of this past year. And so what does it look like as Venus is going to retrograde again in this year? How does that like show up? What's different about it?
Let's just take a moment to say something about retrogrades themselves, because as we've talked about before, you and I in our astrological explorations, we love to chat about this stuff, but people who have some familiarity with astrology have heard about Mercury retrograde. And, Mercury retrograde happens 3 times a year at minimum.
Every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
And it's like when we consider the period of time that Mercury is leading up to a retrograde and getting back out of a retrograde, the amount of time Mercury is spending in this kind of like forwards, backwards, forwards process is like half of the time. So here we are seeing like on Instagram and, all this stuff about Mercury retrograde and okay, whatever. Like that is part of normal life almost. Venus retrograde is one of the rarest retrogrades. It does not happen every year. So when Venus is retrograde, we feel it and it means something really, really important. And so giving that context, we can establish that the 2025 Venus retrograde in Aries was very individualistic. It happened in Aries, the sign of one, the sign where we learn like a healthy dose of selfishness and putting ourselves first.
Yeah.
This coming year, when Venus goes retrograde, it does so in the opposite sign of Libra. And Libra is the most relationship-oriented sign of the zodiac. It is a sign that is all about balance, about cooperation, about diplomacy, about tact, about social grace, right? And all of these things I'm saying take into account other people and who is in our surroundings and what might be offensive to them or what might overstep their personal boundaries. And so I think 2025 and 2026 are an interesting pair because we're getting to see these two retrogrades that really dovetail nicely off of one another. And in 2025, we were really focused on me and what do I want when it comes to relationships. And then in 2026, we're kind of putting that to the test and learning how to show up with that stronger sense of self and standards and boundaries, but how does that integrate into a relationship context and how far can we go with that and what is too far and when does that encroach upon the other person and their needs? And so 2026, this Venus retrograde, let me look and see when that is. This is October, November of this coming year. It is going to be a really interesting time when we put kind of this renewed sense of self to the test. And we see like how far can we take that and how much can we focus on meeting our own needs and expressing what we want in a relationship context. And, we might even learn some hard lessons about what is taking that too far. And sometimes are there any relationships we're in that cannot withstand us showing up as this new, like, firmer, more authentic and unapologetic version of ourselves?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So call it March, April of 2025. What were the things that were coming up for people around like what you need in relationships, like the self-focus piece of it, and then kind of like October, November of 2026 is when we're really going to like maybe be at the peak of it in terms of like, how do I now take this self into relationships? What does that mean? How much can I be myself in relationships or get what I want and need out of it. When you talk about this retrograde moment for Venus, like, do you think like primarily it's happening during that time? You're getting the insights during that time? Does it spread like beyond those dates? Like how should people think about the time period around a retrograde and what's actually happening during those months versus like maybe the outcomes of that?
Okay, great point. So Venus enters what we call shadow on August 31st of this coming year.
Oh, that means long time period before then, even.
Yes. So Venus spends about 40 days retrograde. But Venus is backtracking over a portion of the sky Venus had already covered. So we call that like the shadow degrees. And so Venus will be moving over those degrees of the sky, that area, that territory in the sky, starting August 31st. So really between August 31st and the point Venus goes retrograde, which is October 3rd. So we're talking all of September. All of September, we are kind of setting ourselves up unknowingly for what is about to go down. Then we hit October 3rd, Venus turns retrograde, and we're kind of having to go back over some of the conversations that we've had, some of the decisions that we had, the things that we said. And it's kind of a period of reworking or re-establishing or renegotiating how we are going to cooperate with a partner of any type, right? That could be a best friend, that could be a boss, that could be a subordinate at work, that could be a romantic partner. A lot of times, Venus does speak to romantic relationships and that sort of partnership. So it will be from October 3rd until November 13th, that 40-ish day period where we are kind of having to slow down and like reflect on what was happening in September and maybe say, okay, where do we go from here? What maybe could I have done better? What do we need to renegotiate in terms of how our relationship works and how we find balance between me and you and what I like and what you like, what both of our needs are. And then, of course, Venus will go direct again on November 13th, and that takes us into mid-December. So that's a big portion of next year. My advice to people in advance is always, whatever is happening during this period of time, just know that the story isn't over. And if things seem like they're heading in one direction, they'll probably turn back around. If you miss an opportunity to address something, don't worry. The universe will bring it back up for you again. And so, it's amazing how these timelines work. And also, when we do something a second time or even a third time, we do it better than we ever have. I mean, it's like these workshops. I mean, I literally was having a workshop in a home, like sponsored by a host who I had done a workshop for as a baby astrologer. And like my presentation was way over people's heads. I think they enjoyed it to some extent, but it's like, I fell on my face. Like when I look back, I'm like, wow, that was rough, and being able to show up in the same home and totally kill it was so amazing. And that's how life goes. We can't just we don't just fall down. It's about getting back up and doing the same thing and having the conversation again, trying to show up as our authentic self better. We can stand in our own light without casting shadow on another person. But sometimes when we're like trying to be firm and we're new at it, we have a tendency to overstep or to like present it in not the best way. And so during this period of time, next September, October, November, the first half of December, we are really learning new relationship skills. And it's okay. like we're going to make mistakes. That is how retrogrades work. And the universe is like, it's okay, but we're going to go back and we're going to revisit that, and the next time around, you're going to do it better. So Venus for all people in their natal chart will also relate to particular houses of the chart, which are specific life experiences. For me, for example, my IC, which is the part of the chart that relates to home and property, Venus is going to retrograde right onto that point and sit still. So of course I wonder, will I be moving? Will there be some cosmetic change to my house? And so it is about more than relationships. Talking to an astrologer would be a good idea in terms of seeing how all of the astrology of the coming year aligns with your chart and kind of, wrapping your head around what that might mean and being curious, as I say. But relationships are always a big theme with Libra. So I expect that to be the case for a lot of us.
Yeah. And Libra for me is 7th house. So it's like partnerships and, romantic relationships, business partnerships, all those kinds of things. So it's like doubly centered in that energy, I feel like, for me.
Yeah. It's true. It's very true for you. It's like, this is going
literal
to be a period.
In a way.
Yes, it is. And we love that in astrology. When we see like significations overlap and the chart is telling us the same thing multiple times, it's like, okay, bingo, like this is going to be the theme that we're working with and trying to perfect,
Yeah, that feels spot on. What do we need to know about this kind of 36-year cycle that is ending, right, in early 2026, February 20th? We talked about like, we're in the dark room right now, kind of feeling around. We don't know what's going to happen. But like, as we move into 2026, like, is there anything else you would say about that?
So Saturn in astrology relates to structures and boundaries and like contracts, things that have been established. And Neptune represents the sea and it has this dissolving sort of quality. So when these two planets align, we see things happening in the world around us that can feel concerning insofar as like kind of the structures of our life are kind of dissolving away, or, it's like life as we know it is melting away somehow. And so some of the things that we see when these planets come together are like the fall of old paradigms, forms of government, political parties, leadership. We also see changes in international alliances, territorial borders, trade and immigration are always issues. Boundaries are dissolved and created. Big medical and scientific breakthroughs happen. Important humanitarian and spiritual issues can come up. And issues of toxicity, like like climate change issues, issues with things that we ingest, right? Like food additives. And it's like all of these things that I'm listing off are like clear as day, part of our reality right now.
Yeah.
And I think when we see all of these things happening, it's like, oh, like we're going like life, we're going to hell in a handbasket. Like what is happening? Like, where are we going? What countries will be our friends? Like, what do our immigration policies look like moving forward? And so there's a lot of just change in our environment that we're having to account for. I mean, this has like on some level a psychological toll on us. And I think it is helpful to know that in astrology, this alignment happens every 36 years. And so this is not our first rodeo. In 1989 and the years surrounding it, very similar things were happening. Here's a great example. One of the ways that boundaries are being questioned right now is like the transgender issue. Did you know like the first transgender operation happened on a Saturn-Neptune alignment? the last cycle. It's like crazy how these very specific issues, they come around and they come around and they come around again, and history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so I think what people should know is that this is normal. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. And it's like just being where we are in the process and being okay with it is super important. And that's something that we need to prepare to do in 2026. This isn't over yet. There's kind of like more dissolving away and melting of established structures and the way things work. They don't work that way anymore. And what is it going to look like going forward? That's okay. We can just be where we are, So the same is true in our own lives. It's like if there are things that have fallen away, pieces of our life that we took for granted, like pieces that felt like very significant to us feeling grounded and knowing what our life is going to look like in the future. If those things are melting away or dissolving, it's okay. Like that's what happens when these two planets align. And we can sure as the sun's going to come up tomorrow, know this is clearing space for something new that is trying to be born. And wherever the space is, wherever a space is wiped clear for us, we are being empowered to imagine and build something totally new for ourselves. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity that lies beyond the more difficult parts of letting things fall away that have kind of outlived their purpose or are not part of the new era of life. Letting those things go can be difficult, but it is empowering us and it is giving us an opportunity to reimagine certain elements of our lives moving forward. So I think that's very important for 2026. So we've already said the Saturn-Neptune alignment happens on February 20th. I think that February and March are going to be very pivotal months in our lives in general. That also overlaps with the eclipses. So just in terms of like scheduling ourselves for the year ahead, this is why I wanted to go here, and I can keep it really short. But it's like when we hit eclipse time, our plans and our desires and expectations for those periods of time really become secondary to bigger forces. It's like things are happening outside of ourselves. There might be circumstances that are beyond our control that we have to respond to. Do you see what I mean? Where it's like our scheduling or what we expected doesn't really fall in a line. So those are the two periods of time I like to tell people, schedule around these, even, big projects, big meetings, even vacations. When you schedule these important things during eclipse time, you're kind of setting yourself up to have to deal for factors that you don't know about in advance. And so those two periods of time are February, like mid-February to mid-March, and then early August to early September.
Okay. So the idea is kind of leave yourself some space for things that you maybe don't foresee or that are going to be outside of your control. And so just having that space, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, will be helpful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about the kind of like, hey, we're on the cusp of something new, the slate is being wiped clean, and all of these like incredibly heavy and difficult things that are happening on a collective level, I think as we think about it from a personal standpoint, I like to, and this is not intended to say like we shouldn't be out protesting and voting and doing all the things, right? We should do all those things in order to like make sure our voice is heard from a collective standpoint. But when it comes to our personal lives, where we're like completing these cycles, maybe like feel like we're lacking clarity and moving into a new space, I think understanding where we are in this moment in our personal lives, I think can be really helpful because it almost like gives us permission or like maybe even empowers us in a way to say, Like, let me not go and like wear myself out in this messy middle part before I see what the new thing is. Like, ruminating on things, overthinking things, having a lot of anxiety about like not having clarity or feeling like you're a little bit in the dark. Like, those are very natural ways to be. And what I love about astrology is like, okay, this is going to happen. And like, we could spend all of our time and our energy like changing things and planning and stressing out and exhausting ourselves in that moment. Or we could know that we just can't see the green shoots coming out of the ground yet for whatever seeds have been planted. And so, like, allow, surrender, let this happen and like rest and, you know, do the other thing. Maybe like go back and clean stuff out, whether that's like psychologically or physically, or, you know, I just wonder if there's like a way we can maybe put some of that energy to work or not be spending all of that energy because of the uncertainty of this like moment that we're in for, you know, when this comes out the next like couple of months.
Exactly. I think that's what I work on so much with my clients is be where you are. And it's okay to be where you are because that's the point life has brought you to. So it's where you're supposed to be. So even not being clear can serve a purpose and you can just not be clear. That doesn't mean go figure it out. Yeah. You know, there is a period of time where it might even be useful to just sit and not be clear. And that's harder for some people than others. Yeah. You know, if you're someone who's a big planner, that feels really unnatural to you. And so knowing, hey, this is a period of time where things are not supposed to be clear for some reason or another. You know, maybe you're being protected to not know. I always think like I'm glad I didn't know exactly what job I was going to end up in because it would have been hard for me to end up there. Like I couldn't have planned it better myself. So I'm thankful like the universe like lined everything up for me. And so it's like, well, maybe everything is being lined up for me and I just need to be unclear because that opens my mind a little bit to other possibilities that I would not even think of if I was too busy planning.
Yeah. Yeah. And planning in a way that you don't know what you're even planning for, that is going to be wasted time and energy, right? And like it may give us a sense of control in the moment or like a perceived sense of control in the moment. And then you're just going to be tired when we kind of like start to make this shift.
Right.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think we should wrap it up, but I'm curious, like out of all of the stuff that we talked about, do you have a couple of takeaways or, you know, what are you carrying forward into this year for yourself?
Mainly excitement. You know, when I say I'm aiming to be curious, I'm really trying to embody that and, you know, always reflecting and realizing that in hindsight, we can see all the different ways that our life has panned out exactly how it needed to get us to where we are and to get us to outcomes that we love for ourselves, you know? And so I'm trying to stay in that space. I mean, I feel really unclear. I feel really uncertain about what the year ahead has in store, but you know, I've fallen down and gotten back up enough times. Like, I know I can do it again. I've survived all of my bad days, you know, and all of those bad days kept bringing me to these amazing moments in my life where I feel so grateful that things happened just the way that they did. And so I think it's most important that I go into 2026 knowing that and keeping those concepts really at the forefront of my mind in the year that's coming. And I think that might be, you know, a helpful way to look at it for all of us.
Yeah, I love that. I think for me, this is more just like individual, right? My own kind of intention of being unapologetic or being more audacious in the world. I think for me to do that, I mentioned, you know, I need to be more connected to myself. And I think the way that I need to do that is like my physical body. Like, how do I be more connected to my physical body? And that could look like changing up my workouts or taking a dance class or things like that. Because I feel like I can very easily live my life from the neck up, and like it's all intellectual, it's all practical, and it's all like in my brain, makes a lot of sense up there, right? Or I'll make it make sense if it doesn't. And just being more in touch with like the physical sensations of like what I'm feeling emotionally too, I think will be really helpful. So I might do some experimentation and play around with different things, like things I can do in the morning, or things I can do to close out my day and just like maybe clear out my brain a little bit too.
Yeah, that's exciting. And it'll get you out of your head well. And that's the beauty of the new year, right? Is all of the possibilities and the ways that we can excite ourselves to maybe change up our life a little bit and bring ourselves into better balance.
Yeah, I really truly feel like I can be in a new era if I want to, right? Like I can keep doing things the same way and I don't want to. So yeah, shifting some day-to-day things can be really helpful in that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I'm so excited to see how things pan out. And I am so ready for post-February because, adulting is hard.
Some days more than others, but in this landscape, it can feel a little bit harder. But I think we can adopt a lot of excitement for the year ahead. And I think by the time the year ends, we're going to be justified in being excited about 2026. So
love that.
I'm excited for both of us and everyone who's listening. Lots of new beginnings in store for us all.
Awesome. Well, happy 2026.
Thank you. Same to you. Thanks for having me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If you'd like this episode of Working Your Way, be sure to follow or subscribe so you'll always catch the latest. If you want to bring these kinds of conversations into your workplace, check out selfatwork.com to learn more about my team coaching, Enneagram workshops, keynote speaking, and other ways that we can work together. And to find detailed show notes, explore all the resources from all the episodes and all other things working your way, head to selfatwork.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.